All right, what's going on, guys? Jeff here. So today we're going to be talking about what happened at the FOMC meeting yesterday night. Okay, so this entire thing for the FOMC for this time, we're going to be going through the SEP, which is the Summary of Economic Projections, which is very important because instead of us going through minutes, it's just words on words and words. For this SEP, we are able to look at a lot of important projections, such as your GDP, unemployment, your PCE, aka inflation, and of course, we'll be able to see dot plots. Which is how we actually see for 2022, 2023, and 2024, and even in the longer run, what are the Fed rates that all the FOMC members are actually thinking of going towards. So without further ado, let's get into the SEP first. I'm going to be showing you guys on my iPad itself. So let's go into this whole thing. I was actually going through this myself yesterday. So let's get the important things out of the way first. Of course, this came out 30 minutes before Jerome Powell came to do the Q&A. So of course, I'll be going through the Q&A later as well after we're done with this. But I just want to get some of the core details out of the way before anything happens. All right, so first of all, let's look at why the market actually fell the moment that this SEP came out, because this SEP kind of felt a little bit bearish without Jerome Powell actually clarifying on the minor details that we actually wanted to know more about. Okay, so when this report first came out, okay, over here, you have to look at this. The change in real GDP is 2.8. And honestly speaking, we were expecting anywhere from like 3.2, 3.5, or even 4, because we were expecting big recovery. Okay, something that actually changed also, which is what Jerome Powell actually talked to us about, which is the unemployment rate and also the inflation. Okay, Janet Yellen came out to say that for the inflation itself, they're going to be trying to adjust it onto the higher side simply because of what is happening in Russia and Ukraine. Of course, this whole Russia-Ukraine situation is definitely going to be pumping up some of the inflationary pressure that we will be having in the very, very near future. But something that's going to be very, very important for us to look at over here is unemployment rate is going to go all the way to 3.5%. Okay, we are not expecting unemployment rate to go that high. So the moment we saw a lower change in GDP, a higher unemployment projection, alongside with well, I won't say high inflation, but still, relatively higher inflation throughout. This is the recipe for over here. Okay, this is the recipe for stagflation. Because a stagflation fear is when GDP goes down and then PCE goes up, aka your inflation goes up, your unemployment goes up. That's when stagflation actually happened. Okay, so the reason why I put this little red flag over here is because the Federal Reserve see inflation going up and also see an unemployment going up. Okay, so if we actually remember what the Fed's, well, their main duty is for us to see reasonable inflation, aka about 2% inflation, unemployment being the lowest as possible, aka max employment or minimum unemployment, and also the third one, which would be reasonable rates. And you can see the weird face that I drew over here, which is I don't really call this reasonable rates. Okay, so over here we have to go down to the Fed's fund rate. Okay, so over here at the Fed's fund rate over here, we say that for myself personally, I was expecting about 1.3, 1.4%-ish. Right now, they're going all the way to 1.9%, which is something that is a lot higher than what we expected. And this will be something that we'll be talking about a little bit more later on in the dot plot area. But anyway, let's look at the inflationary pressure. Something that actually caught my eye is over at the 2023 section. So over here, when you look at the core PCE, they're expecting the inflationary pressure to really dwindle down a lot by the end of 2023, which is great because the thing is that when you actually see 2.6, it simply means that they are trying to signal transitory inflation all over again. Okay, so that we are expecting it to go down significantly in 2023, which is a good thing. Okay, we really want this sort of like better information, but of course you do have to understand that this is also in a span of more than a year to come. And that's why a lot of people are a little bit more cautious about the market. And that's why the moment that this report actually came out in the market simply just tanked. Okay, S&P lost all its gain for the day. The Nasdaq lost all its gain for the day. And afterwards, when Jerome Powell came out to give the Q&A, that's when things actually got better. Okay, so over here you can also see this is for the range of things. Okay, so for the range, okay, I can't really zoom in properly. Okay, I guess this is what I have to do. Okay, so for the range, okay, this is for the the federal funds rate, which is why it shows over here the range. Okay, for the range when it goes all the way from 1.4 all the way to 3.1. Like I said before, personally, I'm looking at 1.3, 1.4. Okay, and they are talking about how they are looking at 1.4 all the way to 3.1, which I think is a humongous range for us to really work with over here. Okay, because the thing is that the last time that we had 2.4%, it was in 2018. Okay, that was the last time the Feds actually even increased any sort of rates. And the last time we had 2.5 was since 2008. And that's why it's been so long ago. And right now they're saying that, it's a possibility for us to actually get to in 2022 get to 3.1, because this is the range that they're giving. So of course, I'm kind of assuming that this 3.1 was actually given by Bullard, which is one of the most hawkish member in the FOMC. And of course, later on, I'm going to show you guys the dot plot, which is going to be staggering for you guys to really see. But okay, so over here, technically, I actually made the notes for it, which is like, are we expecting a big recovery? Hence, you are able to give the funds rate all the way to 3.1%. Is that what the Federal Reserve is trying to signal to us? Is it going to be a big recovery? Or is this just going to simply be another one of Bullard's adventure of thinking that we're going to go 50 basis point by 50 basis point in every single hike? Because there's also a possibility. Okay, let's not forget that we still have 6 more hikes. Okay, and let's just say half of the hikes are going to be at 50 basis point. Okay, so that's going to be 3 times 0.25 and then 3 times 50.50. Okay, so that's going to be equal to 0.75 plus 1.5, which is going to be 2 point. Oh my god, I'm so bad at math. 2.25. Okay, 2.25. Okay, 2.25 including the current 2.5 that we the current 0.5 that we have is gonna be 2.5, which is still within this range. Okay, it's still within this 3.1 range, which is why that's what a lot of us are actually taking into consideration as well. What if that these 6 more hikes that we're expecting gonna have half of it being 50 in the 50 basis point arena, and if that actually happens, then of course the market is going to be very, very worried about it. All right, let's get into the dot plot of things. Okay, so the reason why we look at this dot plot, okay, let's see. Okay, this is 1 3 this 5 2 3 1 1. Okay, so over here you get 6 10 6 10 15 16. Okay, out of 16 members, okay, only one is going for the 3.25%, which is most likely gonna be Bullard. Okay, we are expecting that to be Bullard to begin with, which is why I kind of just make it certain. But anyway, over here I actually did the highlighting of it. There are 5 members, which also aka the majority of the members are looking at 1.75% in 2022. Okay, aka 7 rate hikes to go. And if we are doing 7 rate hikes and we are going to be increasing 0.25% in this current meeting as it is, which means that we're also expecting 6 more. Okay, which is why over here 6 left for us to actually go, which is also something that I want to actually explain. Even though right now we're looking at 1.75, do understand that earlier when we saw over on this side, okay, on this side, we saw that it's 1.9 on the Fed's fund rate. So aka we could still be able to see a 7 to 8 hikes if more inflation were to come in. And let's not forget, more inflation will be coming in, because you have to also take into consideration that the whole Russia-Ukraine situation has not completely dissolved yet. Okay, oil prices, wheat, palladium, nickel, aluminum, all this are still going to be going up, and all these prices, where the pricing pressure actually comes in, is going to come in April and May. Okay, that's where we actually see most of the pricing pressure coming in. Okay, Of course, over here, I just kind of just highlighted out a little bit, which is during the Q&A. Jerome Powell kind of just blurted out a little bit, saying that, yeah, there's going to be 7 more rate hikes in 2022. There's something he blurted out. I don't want to put him on the record for it, but, something that he did say. So I would assume that that's something that was actually being said during the FOMC meeting. Maybe, not sure. Okay, anyway, something that we also want to be taking note of is 2023. Okay, in 2023, over here, like I said, we have the... let me just in case you guys can't see it. Okay, over here, we put it where 4 members actually think that we're going to hit 2.25%. Okay, well, not really 2.25%, about 2.3. I'll say about 2.3% actually, 2.3%. Okay, which is similarly going to be about the 2 more extra rate hikes from the current projection that we do have. Okay, 2 extra rate hikes from the current projection that we do have. And that's going to be happening in 2023, which also means that in 2022, we're going to be having the main bulk of all the interest rates going up. And of course, Jerome Powell did say something along the line. Whereas, okay, hold on. Can I have a blank page? Come on now. Okay, I'm just going to use this blank page, okay? Okay, so basically what Jerome Powell said, okay, well, someone asked Jerome Powell, okay, saying that, if, let's just say, we have the, hold on, that's my eraser. Okay, we have old inflation and got new inflation, okay? We got old and new inflation, okay? For the old inflation is, of course, from the pandemic. And then the new inflation is, of course, Russia-Ukraine. Okay, Russia-Ukraine. Okay, so for the old inflation, we heard of the word transitory, which kind of became a meme about it because Jerome Powell kept saying that it's going to be transitory, and then eventually he said, all right, we have to retire the term for it. But what he was actually thinking of is that for the inflation to actually hit its peak, okay, it's going to hit it in March of 22, which is where we are today, okay? And the new inflation came in. And right now we are expecting to push everything away by 1 whole quarter. So aka we are going to be doing it, that will be June, July of 2022. So we're expecting the new inflation to actually peak in June, July of 2022. Okay, so instead, back then, the whole inflation chart was it was like this. Okay, and we are thinking of this as March. Okay, this was supposed to be March, and we are expecting it to go down like this. Okay, we are expecting this to happen, and of course, over here would be most likely 2023. I bet 2023. Okay, but of course, that's not happening. Okay, and right now, what Jerome Powell is saying is that instead of this happening, it's going to be more like this. Okay, and then yeah. Okay, so this was March 2020, and then they are saying that this would be June, July. Of course, this huge dip is most likely going to be 2023 or even 2024. Okay, of course, right now over here, this might actually take about 2 years. Okay, I'm just showing this because over on my screen, I don't really have that much space. Yeah, but basically, this is what Jerome Powell is saying for the old inflation, new inflation, which also show up in the Q&A. But I'm going to be showing you guys 2 questions that was being brought up by Jerome Powell, by the panelists, which is from New York Times and I think CNBC, I'm not sure, where they actually asked very, very important question that we really wanted to understand more about. So later on, we'll go through that a little bit more. Okay, but over here, let's just get back to this again. For the longer run of things, okay, for longer run, we're still expecting inflation, not inflation, interest rates, the Fed's fund rate to be about 2.25%. Of course, this is what the Federal Reserve basically are working towards, okay, 2% to 2.5%. That is the magic range for them to actually have so-called reasonable rates, aka just for them to actually beat inflation-ish. So hopefully that's the longer run of things. Okay, we're not sure if we're going to get that, and this is the basis of the entire report. Something that actually caught my eye all the way at the end, which I did not see a lot of people talk about, which was over here, which is the average historical projection in the error range. Something that we really need to take into consideration over here, which would be the change in real GDP. Let me just do the change in real GDP, and then also for the consumer prices, aka inflation. Okay, they are talking about plus minus 1.5. Okay, so if we expect GDP, earlier we are looking at 2.8. It can easily be minus 1.5, which would be 1.3, or it can go all the way up to like about 4. 4.3, yeah, about 4.3, I guess. Yeah. Okay. Personally speaking, I don't think this is going to be happening if we see a huge inflation coming in, especially the market has already basically priced in on the fact that the March, April, May data that's going to be coming out is going to be on the higher side of things. Inflation is going to be really ramping into the market with the oil prices going up and such. So chances of us actually getting this 4.3 on the GDP side of things, very, very unlikely. Of course, for us to get the 1.3 on the GDP is also very, very unlikely, because even during the pandemic peak fear and uncertainty, we still did, I think, 1.8 or even 1.9. Okay, so I do think that 1.3 is very, very unlikely. Okay, however, I still think that there is a possibility for us to actually see anywhere from 2.5 to 2.8 instead. And of course, if we do see in the next SEP, where we see 2.5, where the GDP projection actually drop down to about 2.5, then that's where we actually have a little bit of fear. Okay, similar to the consumer prices, okay, which is the inflation side of things, inflationary pressure, it goes all the way to like 1.3 plus and minus. Of course, honestly speaking, right now, we are taking into account for year-over-year data instead of month-over-month data. So I don't really think I would be that wary about this, about a 1.3. Okay, a 1.3 is surprisingly a very small amount that we don't really have to be worried about, because right now they are looking at, let me just go all the way up here. Okay, right now they're looking at 4.3. I know 4.1 for the core PC inflation. Okay, they're looking at 4.1. Okay, let me just, okay, they're looking at PCE. We're looking at 4.1. So if we do plus minus 1.3, we're looking at 5.4 or 3.8, I think. Yeah, should be. I don't know. My math is not good, okay? But anyway, we're looking at either 5.4% or 3.8%. Either way, I don't know. Same thing. I do not see this really happening, simply because of oil prices in the coming months as well. But of course, Jerome Powell kind of also step on the base of things and kind of just calm the market down a little bit. So I'm not that worried about that part of things. Similarly, I do not think that this is going to be happening either, because 5.4% is going to be horrid. Right now, like I said, the market has already priced in on the fact that oil prices is going to go up. And also something that Jerome Powell actually said beforehand, which was during Congress, when he was testifying in front of Congress, he actually said something along the line that oil prices is not going to create that big of an inflationary pressure, simply because the prices of oil is only going to increase by once or twice. It's not going to continuously increase over and over again. So there's not going to be an exponential increment for the oil prices. So it's not as if like we're going to see $85 per barrel today, and then the next month we're going to see 120, the next month we're going to see 160, the next month we're going to see 250, that kind of thing. So inflation kind of just ends in the first and the second cycle. Afterwards, we're definitely going to see either disinflation or deflationary pressure on whatever commodities that's currently being propped up by this entire Russian-Ukraine situation. So that's kind of the basis of what Jerome Powell said in this entire thing. Okay, but anyway, this is for the SEP alone. Okay, this is only for the SEP alone. Okay, today we do have to talk a little bit more about what Jerome Powell actually said. Okay, so over here I am going to share my screen for Jerome Powell to go through the Q&A. Okay, so over here, let's see.
Go to Tina at the New York Times.
Hi, Chair. Thank you so much for taking our questions. I wonder if you could detail your thinking a little bit about how you're considering the risks of going too fast and potentially tipping the economy into a recession, and how you're weighing those risks against the possibility of going too slowly, allowing inflation to become embedded and not getting behind the curve.
Okay, so what this person basically asked over here, which is very, very important for us to actually get into the rest of things. So it's the same thing that I actually questioned as well. Remember when I actually uploaded a video about how we might get into a recession? So I talked about the 0 basis point increment, the 25 basis point increment, the 25 basis point add on with the 6 to 7 rate hikes increment, and also with the 50 basis point increment. Okay, so with all this sort of scenario, what she was saying from I think Jenna from New York Times was basically asking, how does the Feds actually want to find out what's the sweet spot for them to actually go? Because either way, whatever basis point that they were to be increasing is going to be causing a recession, because if they go too slow, essentially we are going to get a recession. If they go too fast, we're still going to get a recession. And even if you find a sweet spot, we get into pseudo recession, which will eventually trigger a recession. So that's why, the Federal Reserve don't really have a very good placement to be at, especially because I don't want to say it, but a lot of people are saying that the Federal Reserve are not really on top of inflation. But of course, Jerome Powell actually did fight back about the fact that we are on top of it. Okay, we're not behind the inflation curve. Okay, but anyway, over here we're gonna be listening to what Jerome Powell actually says.
So I guess I would start by saying that, in my view, the probability of a recession within the next year is not particularly elevated.
Okay, so Jerome Powell said the chances of a recession is not particularly elevated. Okay, that does not mean that recession is not going to be happening. Okay, it simply means that whatever was the probability for a recession before, it is not being elevated. So if before we are 80% going into a recession, it's still going to be 80%. Basically the fact. Okay, and of course that's me just being a little bit bearish about it. Of course, it could be like 10% or 0%, whatever it is.
And why do I say that? Aggregate demand is currently strong, and most forecasters expect it to remain so. If you look at the labor market, also very strong. Conditions are tight, and payroll job growth is continuing at very high levels. Household and business balance sheets are strong. And so all signs are that this is a strong economy, indeed, one that will be able to flourish, not to say withstand, but certainly flourish as well in the face of less accommodative monetary policy. So I guess that's how I would say I'm looking at that. Of course, the objective is to achieve price stability while also sustaining a strong labor market, and that is our overall objective. But we do feel the economy is very strong and well positioned to withstand tighter monetary policy.
Yeah, okay. So over here, what Jerome Powell basically said was that we have good demand, our balance sheets are all right, businesses are doing well, and in general, people in the economy are doing very, very well. So even if we have a less accommodative monetary policy right now, it's not going to be affecting too much, because if the price wages are all doing well, labor market is still very, very tight. It's not as if unemployment is all the way to 5%, 6%. So at the same time, if you're talking about that, what Jerome Powell sees is that even if we were to go a little bit more aggressive on the tapering essentially, it's still going to be all right, because by them doing this, it's not really tapering, just increasing of rates already at this point. But yeah, what Jerome Powell is saying is that if they were to continue doing this, it's actually all right, because the market is all right, the economy is okay for us to actually continue, which is why this suddenly just spiked a very, very good response to the entire market, thinking that, oh my God, Jerome Powell is right. The jobs market are doing fine, the businesses are doing fine, balance sheets are doing fine. You know what? You are right. We can afford a less accommodative monetary policy, and because of that, markets were kind of getting a little bit better because of that. But of course, we have to continue for the next Q&A.
Thank you. Let's go to Howard at Reuters.
Reuters.
Hi, Chairman. I was wondering, in the steps you have quite a markdown to GDP from 4 to 2.8%. I'm wondering, how much of that do you feel is a result of the Fed's stiffer than expected action here? You're talking about monetary policy operating with a lag, but is this going to bite quicker than expected?
So over here, he's talking about the GDP projection that we are actually talking about, because in the December SEP, we were expecting the GDP projection all the way to go towards 3.8 or even 4. Okay, which is why we weren't expecting 2022 to have anything starting with a 1 or a 2, but somehow we saw 2.8. Okay, and what Jerome Powell says here, I would like to say that he single-handedly just brought the market back to life. Okay, it's crazy what he says over here.
I don't think that's a big piece of it, actually. I think some of that is just an early assessment of the effects of spillovers from the war in Eastern Europe, which will hit our economy through a number of channels, highly uncertain, but you're looking at higher oil prices, higher commodity prices. It'll be so we think that will weigh on GP to some extent. So that's part of what moved those assessments down. I think generally monetary policy works with a lag, so some of that would also be in there. But remember as well that 2.8% is still very strong growth. If we think that the potential growth rate of the economy is somewhere around 1.75%, 2.8% is strong economic growth. It would have been one of the strongest years, in fact, of the last expansion. So while it's lower than last year's 5.8%, it's still quite strong growth. So I would say it's quite a strong forecast.
Okay, so what Jerome Powell basically said over here, okay, is because he's actually projecting 2.8 simply because of Russia-Ukraine. Okay, and this is huge because if you're only projecting 2.8 because of Russia-Ukraine, simply if we were to take Russia-Ukraine out of the equation, aka if a ceasefire deal were to come out, if the whole entire peace treaty were to come into play, whatever it is, okay, once sanctionings and all this BS is over, 2.8 is easily going to go all the way to 3.5, 3.6, 3.7, 3.8. We don't care. Okay. And of course, what he's actually saying is that, at the end of the day, 2.8 is still going to be a pretty good increment year over year for GDP projection, because even though we have 5.7 last year, it was also simply because for 2020, we still had a huge drop in GDP. And then afterwards in 2021, whatever happens is going to be a huge increment because you're having a huge increment after a huge drop. Okay, it's basically a huge drop over here, and then afterwards, whatever happens over here, where you have a huge increment up here, it's gonna look huge. Okay, you're gonna hear 5.7 on the 5.7 on the GDP, and you're gonna say, "This is great." We have never seen such a recovery before. But let's not forget that right now we have already gotten most of our recovery from the 2020 all the way to 2021 transition. Okay, and now we're at 2021. For us to get to 2022, of course, there are also some steps for us to go on the way. But if we actually look at historical data, 2.8 is actually a very, very good increment. And that might be something that a lot of people are not really taking into consideration as well. All of us are expecting, we need to at least recover 2 years before we actually get to a better standing, which is like AKA back to the pre of 2020, March 2020. But of course, we cannot really expect that from the market immediately like that. Especially, let's not forget, with inflation still running hard, we also have the whole Russian-Ukraine situation at the moment, which is why it's so important for us to actually take into account. We are projecting 2.8 because the Federal Reserve are actually taking account for what is happening in Russia and Ukraine, which is why it's a huge. Okay, the moment that Jerome Powell said that, because we weren't expecting that from this report. Okay, in this report, we do not know how they actually came about with this 2.8 for the GDP projection. But the moment that Jerome Powell said that, we're actually expecting lower, simply because if this Russia-Ukraine thing is going to go out of hand, 2.8 is our lowest. And it also means that the space for upside is way more than the space for downside. And that's why the market immediately rallied. The market went euphoric. Okay, everyone was happy that Jerome Powell said those words. Okay. And everyone just thought that it makes sense. 2.8 historical sense, perfect. And now we're taking into consideration in historical sense, if 2.8 is going to be a good projection for GDP, okay, let's not forget, we are doing 2.8% GDP projection without a war for the past historical performance. Right now, we're doing 2.8 with a war, okay? So it's like we are on a disadvantage. We have a disadvantage on our hand, and at the same time, we're still going to be projecting similar to a good year's GDP projection, and that's why the market was rallying like crazy. But yes, those are actually the two most important questions, honestly speaking, because these two are the questions that I was really asking myself before the FOMC SEP actually came out. When the SEP came out, when I was reading through, my only worry was about how they are going to be increasing the Fed's fund rate, because let's be honest, we do not know how the Fed's fund rate is going to be going. Are they going to go slow? Are they going to go fast? Either way, it's going to be triggering some form of a recession. What is Jerome Powell's mindset around it? Okay, that was my first worry. And the second worry was basically this, because we were expecting a higher GDP projection. And Jerome Powell basically just be like, don't worry, okay? We're expecting the peak to be in about the next few months, which is, well, essentially earlier just now I actually showed you guys the projection for it, okay? We are expecting the whole thing to be just delayed by one whole quarter. So by June, July of 2022, that's when we are most likely going to be seeing a peak in inflation. And when we see a peak in inflation, that's when we usually start to see a lot of disinflation coming in and essentially starting to go back into a deflationary trend downwards, where we can hopefully see somewhere about your 2 to 3% inflationary trend along the line. Of course, right now they're projecting at about 2023 and 2024. I do think that by about June, July of 2023, that's when we actually start to see something that starts with a 2 or something that starts with a 2 for the inflation, maybe 2.9, 2.8. I'm fine with that. But I do think that you will at least take about June, July of 2023 before we actually see something along that line. But of course, something that we do need to take into consideration in the short term, something that you guys have to also take into consideration, which would be for every single CPI from this month on, is going to be very, very critical. Okay, of course, we are already pricing in, especially the market. The market has already priced in the fact that oil prices are going up, commodity prices are all going up. We are all pricing that in already. Okay, even for this FOMC meeting, let's be honest, because when Jerome Powell came to the Congress to testify, he kind of already gave us the plan. He already said that, we are going to be doing what we did like the start of the decade. In the 0304, where we were just increasing interest rates by 25 basis points every 6, 7, 8 weeks. Okay, that was his plan all along. So the market wasn't really shocked by it. Okay, if he didn't actually say it during the Congress testimony, I can assure you that everyone is gonna get like so panicky over it during this FOMC when they actually explain. And we saw that dot plot. Everyone's gonna go crazy, okay? Because we're expecting 4 rate hikes, and now suddenly we're getting 8 rate hikes. That's gonna be times 2 of the rate hikes, which is why it's gonna be very, very scary for the people who do not know what's actually happening. Okay, so something that, like I said before, okay, something that we really want to be looking at would be next month's, essentially March CPI, which will be out on April 10th, if I'm not mistaken. It's going to be on Thursday, the second Thursday, I'm guessing, of the month. It's going to be very, very important because that CPI is basically going to be showing us what is happening with oil. Okay, I am personally assuming that we might possibly see a 1% on demand over month. But of course, that's also provided that oil prices is constantly going up and up. Right now, I'm not sure about the WTI. Let me just give a look at the WTI prices. WTI for the crude oil WTI, we are looking at $98. Okay, so honestly speaking, right now we're looking at $98.30 per barrel. So I'm not super duper worried per se. Of course, we did see the highest point for oil. It was about 130, I think. It was about 130. Was it? Yeah, about 120, 125. Okay, the highest that we saw 135, 125. So yeah, of course, that's going to be propping up the prices of oil in general. But do take into consideration, okay, before this entire war situation was happening, prices of oil was about $85, $88 per barrel. Okay, in terms of crude oil WTI. Right now it's at about $98. Okay, so there is a possibility that we might actually see some form of euphoria because, of course, people are expecting CPI to be crazily high. But there's also a very, very good possibility that CPI might be actually get a lot lower for March. A lot of us are actually expecting 0.8, 0.9, 1, 1.1, 1.2, somewhere along that range. But let's not forget, if oil prices continues to go down, and then when the people who are doing the CPI suddenly just do the calculation for it, they're like, hold up a minute, like oil prices are basically just up by like 2% or like up by like 4%. That's not going to scare the entire market because, of course, we also have to take into consideration for the aluminum, the nickel, the palladium, wheat prices, all of this, but all of them are so slowly going down. Okay, let me just take a look at wheat. Where is my wheat? Okay, wheat prices. Let's do the 1 hour chart. Let's see. All right, let me just do the day chart actually. Reset. All right. Hold on. How did it just disappear? Come on. Okay. For wheat prices, pre-war, we are expecting a wheat. We are looking at the Korean wheat ETF, which is ticker symbol WEAT. Okay, pre-war, we're looking at about $7 or so. At the peak of wheat prices, it went all the way to $12 for the ETF, about $12.80. Okay, almost $13. This from 7 all the way to 13. Right now, we're back to about 9.8 ish. So honestly speaking, it's still a huge increment. Okay, without doubt. Let me just do a trend line for me to really see how big of a difference. We're still up about 35% ever since the start of pre-war till now. It's still up about 35% for wheat. And of course, with wheat going up, food commodity and food prices are all going to be affected. Okay, and this is not going to be a short-term kind of thing, because I do see that this getting affected for quite some time. But the thing about food is that it's easily being replaceable by other food. Okay, I'm okay with that. We are still going to be seeing strong inflationary pressure in the months to come, and I'm almost certain that that's already been properly priced into the market as well. So I'm not super duper worried about that in terms of food commodity, because food commodity prices has always been a little bit on the rise. You usually see about like a 1% or 2% every single year or so. Of course, in the past year or two, we have been seeing about 3 to 5% increase on the food commodity prices in terms of the inflationary pressure from all the CPI. So yeah, honestly speaking, I do see that, of course, wheat is definitely going to be affecting. I do see that about maybe an additional 5 more percent for the next year to come. But that's purely from food alone. And of course, like I said before, when we have an additional 5% on, let's say, your rice, your cakes, your biscuits, and your fruit rolls, or whatever it is, okay, then at the same time, you're going to get other agricultural food commodities that's going to be going down in price, because if people are getting all this, people are not buying the other things. And people are buying the other things, the wheat prices is going to go down as well. So it doesn't really matter. For food-wise, there's too much of a variety and there's too much of a supply for them to not worry about it. Of course, I don't want to get into the whole world hunger kind of thing. But yeah, that's basically my thoughts about it. Okay, that's all I have for this video. Okay, I have to actually go and read up on more news, especially with the whole Japan earthquake and such, and for me to report the news later on. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later actually.